Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Bernotas, the Director of Instrumental School Methods and Repertoire for Alfred Music. I'm very excited to be here with one of our best-selling authors and one of my great friends, Dr. Peter Boonshaft. Hailed as one of the most exciting voices in music education today, Peter has been invited to speak or guest conduct in every state in the nation. In addition to being my amazing co-author of Sound Innovations Ensemble Development, Peter also serves as the Director of Education for Jupiter Band Instruments. Thanks for joining me today, Peter, for 5 questions with Peter Boonshaft.
Why, thank you, Chris. I am very excited to be here, and I can't wait to hear these questions.
All right, well, then we'll get right into it. First question, very difficult one. Who was your most influential music teacher and why?
Wow. The answer to that question could fill several hours. Mostly because I'm incredibly lucky. I've been blessed to have so many phenomenal teachers throughout my life that it's really hard to choose. But I would say I can think back to one of my earliest memories of a teacher, and that was in kindergarten, believe it or not, where this wonderful teacher invited the entire class to her wedding in the middle of the year, and how we all dressed up and went to the wedding. And it's this wonderful memory of how she made us all feel so special, how she brought us into her world, and she wouldn't get married without us all sitting there watching. And I remember thinking all these years later how important that was to me at the time, all the way to one of my last formal teachers in my last graduate years. I had to take a statistics class. And I had no business taking statistics, but I needed to. And of course, I was really lucky. I had the chair of the math department, who was this renowned expert and scholar. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to survive this. Well, she walked into class the very first day, and she started flipping coins and hurling dice and playing games with us. And I had a ball, and we all did. It was so much fun. And even though the subject matter was detailed and very, very taxing to me, she made it so enjoyable that I looked forward to going to class. We would race to class to see who could get to the closest seats to her. And I remember all these years later saying to myself, she made it fun. And if I can make something enjoyable, not just productive, but enjoyable as it's productive, how much better a teacher I could be if I got close to what this remarkable woman was able to do. My school band and choir directors were so important to me and framed so much of what I still do to this day. But I guess of all the teachers, I had a few in college that were just meant the world to me. But among all of them, it was William Willett, who he was the driving force to me. He was everything I wanted to someday strive to be close to. I knew I'd never be as good as he was, but I always wanted that. And it wasn't so much just how much he knew and how good he was at what he did, it was who he was as a person. And, when I look back on it all of those teachers that I remember to this day and cherish, what they had in common was not just they were extraordinarily good at what they did, but they made it important to me. They made me feel like it was important for me to be there and that they cared about me, and they made it fun.
That's great. And, everybody loves their kindergarten teacher, but a statistics teacher, what are the odds?
I know,
Right
especially for
there.
a musician like me.
What are the chances? A statistic teacher? I mean, how many teachers, forget it. I was
Oh,
making
you see, that one went right over my head.
a statistics joke. What are the
You would
chances?
have appreciated that, Chris.
No, but it is true, though. I mean, we all have a fond love of our kindergarten teachers or any of those teachers that we made that connection with that saw us as people and that
Absolutely.
we saw them as people too. I mean, character does matter, and I think that
A-
transcends our subjects matter.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
All right. So, thinking about our teaching careers and your
Mhm.
teaching career in particular, what is an obstacle that you have encountered in your teaching career, and how did you overcome it?
Wow. Well, the first thing I'm thinking about and drawn to answer that question would be come up with things like, oh, when I've had to teach in a place where the facilities were terrible, or when I didn't have enough money to do this, or when I didn't have the permission to do something, and those limitations, which we all as teachers encounter. But when I really search the truth, I would say that the biggest limitation I've encountered in my teaching career has always been me. It's when I set up an expectation where I say, well, this is what's going to happen. And I kind of prove it right. Or when I say, this is what the kids can do, and I don't try to go farther than that for fear. Of putting them in harm's way or failing or something like that. And it's when I can step out of that situation and look at it like an outsider would and say, I don't know any backstory. I don't know the circumstances. All I know is here's what I hear or what I see, and I believe they can do this. Now I have to figure out a way to get them there. And I would say throughout my career, I could list so many times when they've proven me wrong, where when I finally did figure that out, they were able to do so much more than I anticipated or in a different way than I anticipated because they had the ability. I just hadn't trusted them enough at the time. So yeah, I would say it's been me, and I try to be on guard for that because I know it's my first instinct, and I think it is maybe for many teachers because we don't want to set our students up to not succeed, to have any element of failure in there. But if we don't test the waters of how we can get around that, often sometimes it's a limitation for our students.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's very honest to think that, you personally and your instinct might be the biggest obstacle. That reflection is really important, but also the fact that you're pointing out that that's fear-based. I think that's it's in all of us, right? We're all like a little bit fearful. And
Absolutely.
one of the things that we do through our teaching and through our students, I think, is you start to have some faith. You have to have faith in the result. The obstacle's there, but you
Yep.
have to have faith that you can kind of come to a solution to get past that obstacle.
Right. And I think one of the things that comes with a little bit of time and experience is when we start off our career, those obstacles, if something were to go wrong, if we did have a failure, so to speak, we see that as a looming, just horrible situation that's going to be career ending. And what we come to realize is sometimes those setbacks are the fodder or the energy to get past them, and that they really aren't as bad, and that our students will forgive us, and that we can make for even a better experience by having them have the life lesson of, hey, that was a problem, but hey, we figured out a way to get around it.
Yeah, and you get through that together. Kids get to
Right.
see you
Absolutely.
react to that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's go on to our third question.
Okay.
You have been a guest conductor all over the world. Is there a particular experience that has stood out as particularly special or inspirational for you?
Hmm. Uh, Stood out and inspirational. Yeah. Again, I have been so lucky through my career to have traveled so many wonderful places and to have been able to work with so many amazing musicians, whether they be adults or children. And that gift is something I carry with me, and I do appreciate so profoundly. I think one of the most special moments in my career was I had taken a group on a tour. And it was early in my career, and it was a high school honors band. And it was back when I thought if I could do it on paper, it would make sense in reality. And so I packed way too many performances and way too much travel in this 18 days, I think it was. And the students, though, rose to the occasion, and they were phenomenal about the whole thing. And towards the end, I said, okay, I know this is tiring, but you're doing so wonderfully. After the last concert, I'm going to rent the rooftop swimming pool area of the hotel. And as soon as we get done the concert, you're going to go up there. I'm going to get food, and we're going to have just a big celebration of how wonderful this has been. So just hang on. And I kept, holding that out as this one big thing. And they were really excited about it. And so we got back from this performance, and the last concert of this tour, we ended with pictures at an exhibition. And I remember in this performance thinking the whole tour, I thought about the whole tour as we were going through this, kind of flashing by in my mind. And at one moment I looked down just as we hit the Great Gate of Kiev at the end. And I happened to look down at the oboes for some reason, and I saw my principal oboe player in tears. So of course, I lost it, and tears were just streaming down my face. And within a few minutes, I looked out, and there was an ensemble of 100 kids with tears running down their face. And it's a memory that I have to this day. No words were spoken. It was just what being together meant to us all and what the music meant to us all and this shared journey that we had. And I'll never forget it to this very day. And at the end of that, I shooed all the kids and the chaperones back to the hotel so they could start the party. And I stayed back to finish up things at the concert hall. And so I get back, I took a cab back to the hotel, and the head chaperone met me at the door, and he put his arm around me. He said, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm doing great. How are the kids?" He said, "Oh, they're having a ball up there." I said, "Fantastic. There's enough food, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Can I ask you an odd question?" I said, "Well, sure." He said, "Do you have a wallet on you?" And I said, "Yeah." "Oh, do you need money?" I thought maybe I didn't leave him enough money for the food. He said, "No, I just need to hold it." I said, "Okay." So I handed him my wallet. He said, "You have anything else in your pockets?" Now, this was pre-cell phone, so I didn't have one of them. And I said, "No, that's it." He said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah, why don't you give me your jacket?" And I had my tails jacket on. He said, "Yeah, give me your jacket." So I gave him my jacket. I said, "Why? What's going on?" He said, um, yeah, we're fine. So we get in the elevator. We're going up this hotel to the rooftop swimming pool, and about one or two floors before we landed, he said, "Oh, by the way, do you know how to swim?" I said, "Yeah, pretty well." He said, "Okay, good." I said, "Why?" He said, "Don't worry about it." Well, the doors opened, and there was my percussion section, and they each grabbed a part of me gently, and they held me kind of like flat and face up, and they walked me out to the pool, and of course swung me a little bit, and then hurled me into the swimming pool. And of course, all the students knew this was going to happen, so they all had their cameras ready. And I have a myriad of photographs of me, 4 or 5 feet above the water in various stages of coming down to do this giant flop into the water, made just a giant splash. And there I was, soaking wet in what was left of my tuxedo. And I remember thinking how amazing that was. And to this day, I have those photos to remind me of not being thrown into the pool. That certainly wasn't, but that they were such special students that they never ever let down their desire to do their best. They never let down their care for each other and for me, and that emotionally, as much as their performance mattered to them, the people that they were, even at that young high school age, was so very, very special to me. And it's funny, all these years later, because that goes back to about 1982, I think it was. I still hear from a bunch of those students every year. I'll get an email or a little note or a card, and it reminds me how special they were. And it started that night when everyone was in tears, and it ended with me flopping into the water.
That's great. And again, it goes back to that honesty that we are as teachers, and you go through all those emotions with them, having those tears. And I think what stands out with what you said was there's no words for it.
That's right.
Tears happen. You
That's right.
can't you can't it just happens. And
Absolutely.
when you experience that on that emotional plane, and then they throw you in the pool, it's
Right.
definitely going to be memorable.
Oh, it is. Yeah, for both reasons. Yep.
And that's a really funny story for after a performance. But how about as a follow-up, question number 4? Of all your conducting engagements, is there a funny story that you can recall, maybe from a performance or a rehearsal or something in a performance setting that something went wrong or awry, or how did you react to that?
Wow. Well, sadly, this one I could give you a lot of answers to as well. But if I narrow it down, let me think here. Well, a few flood to my memory. The- Certainly, walking on stage with my fly down, which is a horrible experience. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times in my life now, which you don't know until you get on stage and you start to conduct and you see people giggling and pointing. That's a little hard to get past. And then there was the time I remember I was doing a dress rehearsal. Thank goodness it didn't happen at a concert. In a dress rehearsal at a very large concert hall. And the next day after the performance, a show that had been touring was going to be coming in. So they were loading in all the props and sets for this show during our dress rehearsal. And so to do this, they opened both of the garage doors at the same time on either side of the backstage to load this stuff in with the tractor trailers. And when they did, there was a storm outside, and the wind created this incredible draft. And I remember at the time we were doing David Holsinger's "To Tame the Perilous Skies," and right in the middle of this thing, the wind came through and it knocked stands over. My score went sliding across the stage floor, and I thought, oh, really? It had to happen right now. We got through it fine. It was amazing. I was kind of tickled that everyone made it through unscathed. But I thought, yeah, let's not have that happen in a concert. But I think of all of them, the worst one that I would think of was a performance I was doing in Pahuska, Oklahoma, in this glorious town. I'd spent a week there, and the night of the concert was this giant concert hall they had, and it had the largest one-step podium I've ever seen. It really should have been like a three-step podium, but it was a one-step. And so I didn't have the wherewithal when I went to get on the podium to pull up my slacks at the knee just so it wouldn't stress the pants. I didn't think that through. So instead, I just went to step up. And as I did, I heard this horrible ripping sound. And I knew exactly what had happened. So I thought, okay, I can get by this. So I stood very still, my legs together. I made sure that my backside was as still as possible. I didn't want anyone else to know what had happened. So I was very staid as I conducted that concert. And I thought, okay, nobody knows. It's great. Well, after the concert's over, the host had this wonderful barbecue at his home where he invited the board and administrators and family members and parents and things, and it was just fabulous. And just at the start of it, a woman came over to me and said, "Dr. Boonshaft, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." So we kind of walked off to the side, and she said, "I hate to be rude, but either you sat in a big blob of bubble gum or you ripped your trousers." And I thought, uh-oh, she knows. And she said, "I just wanted to make sure you knew." And I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Was it really noticeable?" And she went, "Yeah." And so I thought, oh dear, I didn't fool anyone. These people were just so kind. They didn't make a big thing about it. So we finished that wonderful barbecue, and I took a red eye because I had to conduct in Philadelphia the next day, or right outside of Philadelphia. So I took a red eye, and these two lovely ladies picked me up at the airport. And so as we're driving, they said, "Is there anything we can do for you? Anything you need?" I went, "Well, since you've asked, yes." And I reached into my conducting briefcase and I grabbed my trousers and I handed it to them and I said, "If you could get these repaired, the seam on the back side tore." And I said, "If you could get these fixed, I would be so indebted to you." And they said, "Oh, no problem." So later I think it was the next day or maybe that evening or something, they went to pick me up to take me to the hotel, and they had a nice dry cleaning bag hanger, and there were my trousers. And I said, "Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. What do I owe you?" And they said, "Oh, no, no, it's our pleasure." I said, "No, no, no, I'm paying for this." So I said, "Everything worked out okay." And they were both a little weird about it. They're like, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Well, I mean, they were able to fix them." "Well, kind of." And I said, "Okay, Well, they said, "You might want to take a look." So I looked, and when I looked into the trousers, I saw nothing but what looked like duct tape. Now, it wasn't. It was a kind of a duct tape patch that was basically the entire seat of the pants. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, Dr. Boonshaft, you didn't actually rip the seam. You actually shredded the material." And I said, "Oh dear." And they said, "There's no way to sew that." So they put this patch in and kind of did the best they could with it. And I said, "Will it hold?" And they said, "Oh yeah, definitely it will hold." So I made it through the concert, and I unfortunately those pants went the way of the wind because they weren't really repairable. But I got through the concert because of these two amazing people. But yeah, that was probably the most embarrassing one.
Oh, that's amazing. It's great that you had people to help you through that and you
Oh,
figured it out. And
they were amazing. They did, and thank goodness that Taylor or whoever they took it to figured out what to do.
that's great. And it's perfect that after that one concert was at a barbecue, because that kind of leads to my fifth question,
Aha.
which is, I know you're a fan of amazing barbecue, like I am, and you, in fact, were the one to teach me that the crusty outside of perfectly cooked ribs is called the bark.
Right.
Uh, I want to know what sparked your culinary love and interest in the craft of barbecue. And a follow up to that would be, can you pick your favorite barbecue restaurant?
Wow, that would be like asking me to pick my favorite piece of music. That's a toughie. Well, to the first part of the question, it's an easy answer. And that's my dad. My dad he traveled a lot as part of his business, and he was always fascinated with food. He was a really good cook, but more important than cooking well, he loved the science of cooking. He loved the history of recipes, the culture of recipes, the psyche of what would make a community or a region do something culinarily. And so he loved to study it as much as practice, making food and cooking for us. And so on one of his trips, he'd bring back some bizarre spice that no one in America had ever heard of. And obviously this was pre-internet, when the world was a much more distant place. And so he'd bring back a cheese from someplace that's never been in America. And so I grew up with this my whole life, thinking this is normal. And of course he'd say, well, I had this very cool dish when I was in Holland, and I'm going to try to replicate it. And he would study it and replicate the thing. So I grew up thinking this was the way everybody did this, and kind of followed suit. So I've always loved knowing about food and knowing about the people and the culture. And having been blessed with the opportunity to travel so much around the world, when I'm in a place, I want to get to know the food, because I think it helps us know the society and the culture and the people, and that expression that they foster. So I love to run out and find a unique recipe, or a unique spice, or an interesting food that I can bring home, like my dad did. And I don't know where the barbecue came from exactly, because my dad, I don't remember him ever really barbecuing. He did just about everything else when it comes to food, but not barbecue so much. And I think it's because I ate it when I was younger, and I just loved it. It was always one of my favorite foods. So I started going to restaurants whenever I could find an opportunity to go to a barbecue restaurant. I head off for that restaurant, just out of a love for enjoying to eat it, and then started becoming fascinated with it, and obsessed with it, to the point where I wanted to know more, and I wanted to study it, and I wanted to be able to do it better. And it's been a lifelong pursuit to know more about barbecue. And I think one of the things that makes your second part, picking my favorite barbecue restaurant, is one of the things that's so alluring about the science, if you will, the culture, whatever you want to call it, of barbecue. And that is that every place that does barbecue is somewhat different from any other place. When you're in Texas, it's not just Texas barbecue. There are regions in Texas. When you're in, let's say, South Carolina, it's not just South Carolina barbecue. It's different places. Matter of fact, I saw a wonderful graphic not too long ago of a southern state that had their barbecue sauce that had become kind of the norm, and it was by county. And the state had like 6 or 7 different barbecue sauces, radically different, depending on which county you were. And I've experienced, as I'm sure you have, that even within a county, heck, within a town, there'll be 3 or 4 different expressions of a sauce or of a technique, by what that chef and that person's family had grown up eating. So I think that's what makes it such a phenomenal hobby, if you will, is because when you land in a place and you go to a barbecue restaurant, it's going to be different than any other place. I certainly have favorites. I love Dinosaur Barbecue, which is a restaurant here in New York. It started in Syracuse, and it's now got branches all over the place, including New York City and in New Jersey as well. And I've always loved that. I was doing an event north of Syracuse many, many, many years ago. And as I was going back to the airport, the fellow said, "I need to feed you." And I said, "Great." He said, "You like barbecue?" And I said, "I love barbecue." I ran into this place, and it's been a favorite ever since. Bogart's in Missouri is absolutely one of my favorite barbecue restaurants. I just think it's just stunning. But the truth is, I have favorites in each place, and I think really the answer to the question would be, what's my favorite in that region or this town? Because I have so many favorites. If I'm in Chattanooga, I know right where I'm going to go. If I'm in Austin, I know right where I'm going to go. And it's around the country, because it's phenomenal how barbecue has become such a love in the United States, especially, where you can go anywhere, places you would never think would have a fascination with barbecue, and there are 3 barbecue restaurants. So it really is a never-ending thing. It's almost like, as I said, picking your favorite piece of music. There's just too many to pick from.
And we've talked about this a little bit before too. It's very personalized, and it's an artistry. It's very correlative to music. And I'm thinking about it as you're talking about it. Everybody has their individual. It's like a chili cook-off. You can do one in your community, and everybody's got their own sauce. They've got their own take on it, their own rub, and how they do it. And I think that's kind of what you're right. You pulled in the culture of it, and all these things you're talking about with the food, the culture, the people. It's all musical. And I think it's a perfect correlation to what it is that you and all of us have done in music, is connect through music and through foods too. In many, many ways, it's relationships, right?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. Yes, yes.
Well, that is fantastic. And Peter, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day today to join us for these 5 questions, to just give everybody a little bit of background information about the man behind the myth. So thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you, and I appreciate your kindness.
You got it. And anybody watching, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on 5 Questions with Dr. Boonshaft.